Once upon a time, there was a young man named Joseph. He was 17 years old and was the youngest of 12 brothers. And his father Jacob loved him the most. His father loved him more than his brothers because Joseph had been born to him in his old age. Joseph's father had a special gift made for him, a beautiful, colorful coat. This made his brothers very jealous. But it wasn't just the coat that upset them. Joseph also had dreams. And he told his brothers about these dreams. They hated him even more. He dreamt that they were all working in the fields, and his bundle of grain stood up while theirs bowed down to his. His brothers didn't like this one bit. They already felt left out. They didn't want to hear more about Joseph's dreams. "Are you saying that you will rule over us?" they asked angrily. One day, the brothers went to look after their father's flock at Shechem. So, Jacob sent Joseph to check on them. Joseph's brothers saw him approaching from a distance and said, "Here comes the dreamer." Filled with anger and jealousy, they plotted together to get rid of him. "He's always showing off. Let's throw him into a pit and leave him there," they said. At first, as they planned to get rid of him, Reuben said, "Let's not kill him. Why should we shed blood?" He suggested throwing him into an empty well. Meanwhile, Reuben was secretly planning in his heart to save Joseph later. But then they saw a caravan of traders heading toward Egypt, and Judah said to his brothers, "What will we gain by killing our brother? Let's sell him instead." And that's exactly what they did. They sold their own brother to the Ishmaelite traders as a slave. Joseph was taken away to Egypt, and his brothers went back home. They showed their father the blood-stained coat, and lied that Joseph had been killed by a wild animal. Jacob believed. He tore his clothes and mourned deeply for his son for a long time. He refused to be comforted. Joseph was sold to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. But God was with Joseph, so he succeeded in everything he did as he served in the home of his Egyptian master. Potiphar noticed Joseph's good work and made him the head of his household and property. The Lord began to bless Potiphar's household for Joseph's sake. But then, trouble came again. Because Joseph was very handsome and well-built, Potiphar's wife tried to lure Joseph into committing adultery with her. Joseph refused, saying, "How could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" She kept pressuring him, but he refused and kept out of her way as much as possible. She was angry and lied, saying Joseph tried to force himself on her. Potiphar believed her and was very furious. And Joseph was thrown into prison. It felt like everything was falling apart for Joseph. But even in prison, the Lord was with Joseph. The Lord made Joseph a favorite with the prison warden. Before long, the warden put Joseph in charge of all the other prisoners and over everything that happened in the prison. Some time later, Pharaoh's 2 prisoners, his cupbearer and baker, came to Joseph with troubling dreams. Joseph, through the Spirit of God, interpreted the meaning of their dreams correctly. The cupbearer's dream meant he would be restored to his position, and the baker's dream meant he would be executed. Joseph said to the cupbearer, "When things go well for you, please remember me and help me out of here. Mention me to Pharaoh, so he might let me out of this place. For I did nothing wrong, but I am here in prison." But the cupbearer, however, forgot all about Joseph once he was freed. Joseph stayed in prison for 2 more years, still waiting and trusting in God. Instead of Joseph licking his wounds and complaining, he served others wholeheartedly even in jail. Then, Pharaoh had a dream that no one could understand or interpret. The cupbearer suddenly remembered Joseph and told Pharaoh about him. Pharaoh sent for Joseph. Joseph explained that the dream meant Egypt would have 7 years of plenty followed by 7 years of famine. He advised Pharaoh to store food during the good years to prepare for the famine. Pharaoh was amazed at Joseph's wisdom and made him the 2nd most powerful man in Egypt, in charge of all the grain storage. Joseph went from being a prisoner to a ruler. All because he trusted God through every hardship. Years passed, and a famine hit Egypt. It also hit the land where Joseph's family lived. Jacob heard that there was food in Egypt. So, he sent his 10 sons to Egypt to buy food for them. Although Joseph recognized his brothers, they didn't recognize him. He could have turned them away or taken revenge for the pain they caused him. But instead, Joseph did something incredible. He broke down and wept secretly, and he came out and revealed himself to them. He said, "I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt. Don't be upset with yourselves. This famine that has ravaged the land for 2 years will last 5 more years. So, it was God who sent me ahead of you to save lives. Is my father still alive?" Joseph forgave his brothers and assured them. With joy and tears, Joseph invited his family to live in Egypt, where they would be safe from the famine. Joseph's story reminds us that what God promises, speaks and declares, through dreams, prophecy, or His Word, comes true, no matter what the circumstance. It teaches us to fully depend on God as Joseph did. When he interpreted Pharaoh's dream in Genesis 40 verse 7, he said, "Do not interpretations belong to God?" We learnt not to lose sight of God after getting promotion and prosperity. Joseph, even with power and wealth, walked with the Lord and watched God fulfilling dreams. Joseph's story is a story of character development, hope, forgiveness, and the power of God's plan.